So unmute us.
So, yes, Laura, I'm just wondering, if I call the meeting to order, how long till we can get our delegation, because they're up fairly.
Just seconds. They're all in the waiting room, ready for us, so we can.
Laura, I'm just wondering, okay, so council meeting to order. We have an agenda in front of us. Does anybody have any additions to the agenda? Seeing none, motion to accept. Councilor Phillips, all in favor? Carried. Moving on to number 3.1, we have a delegation. They're integrated solutions. So I will turn the delegation, the floor over to you. Welcome.
Hey, good evening.
Can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Sorry, we can't hear you.
Can you hear me?
I will turn the delegation, the floor over to you.
Stand by.
Welcome.
Hey, good
Can you
evening.
hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Sorry, we can't. Something's happening.
It should be solved now, Mayor. I had the YouTube playing in the background.
Okay. Okay, we're good. So can you hear us here now?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes, perfect. So I'll turn the floor over to you. Welcome.
Thank you very much. My name is Isaac Comandante. Thank you very much for inviting us to present the Fire Service Master Plan. And I'd like to say Happy New Year to everybody. Hopefully everybody's staying safe. I have here tonight my partner, Jeff Carlisle, and I'm going to do the first part of the presentation, and Jeff's going to join in with me. Jeff, do you want to say a few words before we get started?
No, I'm sorry, I was trying to put the presentation up. Your worship and council, thank you for this opportunity to present the Clearwater Fire Rescue Services Master Plan, and I look forward to hearing your comments and getting some questions.
Okay, thank you.
Before we get started, how much time do we have to do the presentation?
We have about 40 minutes.
Okay.
I'm going to go quickly.
Can we share our screen with you?
Yes.
Yes, we are sharing.
No, they should be able to share theirs.
Okay. Just so you know, we all have the presentation as well on our computers.
Okay.
So, Isaac, do we have the front page without my notes?
Yes.
Okay, then we're good to go.
Okay. Again, thank you very much. Again, my name is Isaac Comandante, and we'd like to start off by talking about what a fire master plan is. So Jeff, if you can go to slide number 3. So essentially, we've been doing this for a few years now, and we've done a number of different communities all over Canada. And as far as a master plan is concerned, it is a document that's basically a roadmap. And what it does is it provides a systematic and comprehensive approach to evaluating risks. It'll formulate and communicate strategic direction, provide an objective basis to support decision-making with respect to community emergency service needs. So essentially what it'll do is it'll address local needs and circumstances based on municipal goals, fiscal realities, and as we know, competing demands. It'll identify and assess the nature and the sources of risk in the community, evaluate the resource available to address these risks, identify gaps between risk and resources, and then we'll provide recommendations for how to address these gaps. Along with the recommendations, you'll also see in the report, if you've got a copy of the report, you'll see a time in which we recommend the recommendations to be completed. as well as the financial implications that we think that are going to happen based on the recommendations. Slide 5. So again, the fire service master plan will serve as the county's blueprint to go ahead with effective and efficient fire emergency services. Now, we've also taken into account the different communities that are involved, including your own, when we're talking about the blueprint and identifying risks. So how do we do this? Well, essentially, the fire services, the Clearwater County Fire Services delivers fire and rescue services, including investigations and underlying issues, budgets, human resources, service delivery protocols. Will also serve as how fire and emergency response services are delivered, with a view to ensuring existing efficiencies continue. So essentially what we're saying here is that we want to make sure that we're capitalizing on the existing services and how they're doing their job right now. And all we want to do is we want to give recommendations on how to improve that. And of course, what we looked at is we looked at administratively what is working and what is not working for a fire response. Next page, Jeff.
Just before you leave that, specific to the statement of work was that we look at the emergency fire rescue response, your statistics, your historical data, facilities, the committees plan. There's a number of committees that the Clearwater Regional Fire Rescue Services established to facilitate input and engagement. An apparatus plan in terms of your life cycle apparatus, mutual aid review, fire prevention, public education, Safety Codes Act review, administrative review, and the fire underwriters survey was all part of this particular scope.
Okay, so we looked at the needs, the opportunities, and concerns with a view to requirements for streamlining fire service. And of course, we looked at it to a view for safety of the residents as well as the firefighters. And we also looked at the financial efficiencies and proper infrastructure, fair compensation, and rewards for emergency responders. Because the Clearwater is operating a paid-on-call fire service, we want to make sure that essentially what they are is volunteers, and we want to make sure that they're compensated fairly as well. So we looked at all areas of staffing, station location, as Jeff mentioned, apparatus, and equipment and training, mechanical, fire prevention, emergency planning, and public education. And of course, we looked at all financial implications. And again, I mentioned that as part of the recommendations. So I'm hoping you can see this well enough. This is a pictorial of our master planning process. And essentially what it is it's broken down into 3 different silos, one being planning, the other one is analysis. And then of course, there's the implementation process. I won't go through every silo, but what I will tell you is that part of our recommendation when we go through the process is that the fire master plan itself doesn't just stand alone and stand. We want to make sure that the master plan is looked at on a regular basis, and we recommend on an annual basis, because sometimes your community changes as far as risks are concerned, financial implications, and even as far as population is concerned. So here are the standards and references that we used for the fire service the review and then into the recommendations. So we looked at the Alberta Occupational Health and Safety, Firefighter Code of Practice, which is actually part of the Occupational Health and Safety now, Municipal Government Act, NFPA, which is an international standard, Alberta Building and Fire Code, and Alberta Safety Codes. And of course, service provisions from similar communities. So what we did was we did a comparative analysis with different communities. So we didn't just take your particular community or communities and look from the outside in. So we looked from the outside or inside out, and then even further than that, we looked at other communities that are similar to yours.
So as part of the data collection, besides getting all the policies, mutual aid agreements, and all the other aspects of the service, we also conducted a consultative process. And here you can see the in terms of targeted interviews, we did a bunch of interviews with people face to face. We also developed an online survey, and we had a good response from all the members of the Regional Fire Rescue Service. And then we also conducted a comparative analysis, as Isaac was saying, of similar regional county level fire services. So we put all that data together to help influence our objective-based decisions or evidence-based decisions the best you could, because a lot of this is assessing risk, and anybody that knows how to actually calculate risk to the nth degree, I want to know that person, because everything we do in terms of municipal services has an element of risk in it. So we also took a look at a profile of the communities. We looked at the growth, the economy, demographics, your community profile. Are you an agricultural community? Are you industrial, residential? And then we look at the department. How's the department made up? And it's a regional composite, primarily paid on-call service. And what's interesting is that there is a number of demand zones, and I'll get to the demand zones. It's terminology that's germane to the National Fire Protection Association standards, and I'll get into that. And it's each different community has different risks and different demand zones in terms of the types of fires, fire service or emergency responses that they would experience with. So we looked at an overview of the regional fire rescue services. You got 5 geographic stations that are situated geographically throughout the county. Already mentioned paid on call, relying minimally on your headquarters staff of full-time people. You have a coverage area of 18 square kilometers with several demand zones. One of the things we always talk about is the limitations of the paid on call service model. And it's just that they do this to give back to the community. They have full-time job, full-time family, and there is some limitations, especially when you start looking at some of the training requirements, responses, community activities, those types of things. And you don't know from what time or day, month, or whatever time an emergency occurs, who's going to be available and who's going to be able to respond. We took a look at your core services bylaw, the regional bylaw that you have between Clearwater County, the Village of Caroline County, Rocky Mountain House, which was executed in 2020, or I should say executed, that doesn't sound good, that was enacted in 2020. You have a number of mutual aid agreements, I have them listed here, which shows that there's good interoperability and cooperation with all the areas around Clearwater County. We did an analysis of your response times, and in Alberta, the response times includes the shoot time or mobilization. So from the time I dial 911, and in this case it goes to Red Deer ECC, the clock starts ticking, which is by the standards is 79 seconds for them to do the call handling and processing. Then it goes to the alerts the fire department, and then there's a time increment that's based on the demand zone, and we'll get into that very shortly. And then we looked at your effective response force over the past 5 years. On average, how many firefighters you got responding to incidents? And the average is 4 to 8 firefighters, as I indicate in my slide. So on the community risk, you got a large, diverse land area. We looked at your response stat, and wildland urban interface is a risk. It may be it's a moderate risk in terms of the probability you're going to have one, but the consequence is not significant or hasn't been significant recently. And that's not to say that it doesn't exist, but It just it hasn't taken out the whole town or a community as we have seen, or partially we've seen in Alberta and BC of recent. You got transportation corridors with hazardous materials being ferried through these urban areas, suburban areas. We looked at your number of structural fires you have. You have a bit of tourism happening in the region, in the town, but also in Nordig, seasonal tourism. And then I've already talked about the limitations of the paid-on-call service. So, you know, from an overview, you have a typical mix of residential, commercial, industrial, institutional, and agricultural land use for a county with a population of just under 117,000 people. And I need a correction, it's 18,682 kilometers squared, and is largely a natural resource-based economy. Mining, quarrying, oil and gas, agriculture, fishing, and hunting are leading industries. There was a slight increase between 2018 and 2019 of 0.28%, but future is remain relatively flat. Rocky Mountain House is the largest center in the county boundary. The general downward trend of population in the county was also experienced in Rocky Mountain House. In the last decade, the population has decreased from 7,189 in 2010 to 6,688 in 2019. And including the town of Rocky Mountain House and the village of Caroline, the population is nearly 20,000. So these are the factors that we look at when we're doing an analysis of the Clearwater County Regional Fire Rescue Services. So I was speaking to you about NFPA 1720, and this standard is specific to paid on-call fire departments. And you will note on the left-hand side, it shows urban, suburban, rural, and remote areas. And it's based on population density with the exception of remote area, which is based on a distance from the closest fire station. The minimum staff to respond is identified. Then you have the response times. So in the town of Rocky Mountain House, for example, you are assessed as an urban area. So you would need a minimum of 15 firefighters to respond within 9 minutes in 90% of your emergencies. And this includes your other emergencies, just not fire. This particular standard deals with all types of operations that a paid on-call fire department would be called upon to do. Now, I've got to point out that there is no compulsion for any fire service in Canada to, it's not obligatory to meet these standards. We use these as a basis to look at, and we evaluate all the other factors like the community risk factors, demographics, population, as I've just gone through. So this just gives us a foundational look at what what is a leading practice in paid on-call fire departments. So, like I said, a large portion of Clearwater County is categorized as remote with no defined response travel time and a minimum of 4 firefighters. The town of Rocky Mountain House would be considered urban with a 9-minute response time and 15 firefighters. The Leslieville, Condor, and Nordig areas would be considered rural areas with a 14-minute response time and a minimum of 6 firefighters 80% of the time. Caroline would be considered suburban area with a 10-minute response time with 10 firefighters and 80%, the 80 percentile. So if we switch to other leading practices here, you can see that, or this is the leading practice. This is kind of a graphic on suburban. So this would be for Caroline, for example. If you see on the right, the notification of the emergency call, the dispatch time, call handling, the time for the paid on calls to go from their house or place of work to the station, and then the travel time. And in this case, it's 10 minutes and 80%. And the call comes into the ECC in Red Deer. This just shows you what it looks like. Then there's a setup of 120 seconds, which is to pull out the medical equipment or do your connect your hydrant, get your hose layout, your SCBA on, or whatever the particular situation requires. The other leading practice in Alberta is with respect to the limiting distance and fire department response. That was the acronym HIRF, High Intensity Residential Fire, was actually the Municipal Affairs standing committee that developed this input for the building code. And really what it means is it's to build safe communities. So if Rocky Mountain House was to build a whole new neighborhood, it would have to meet the building code requirement of a 10-minute total response time in 90% of the incidents, or you would have to engineer that development differently. You would have to have larger lot size with greater separations between the exposed residents, or you would have to beef up the construction and have tempered glass, protected openings on exposed faces. So there's a number of things you do, or if you can't do that, you build another fire hall so that you can achieve that standard. Again, this is not meant to for firefighters to race to existing neighborhoods. It's just saying that in Alberta, if you're going to build a new community neighborhood center, this is the requirement of the building code. So we take a look at the response statistics, and here you can see Leslieville and the 5 years that we looked at, the number of calls across the bottom. I will say at the onset, and the Chief Davian can join in if it need be, there is some noticeable variances in the stats, but over that period, there was a number of changes made in the type and categorization and the computer system used to distill these stats down. So I just want to qualify that to say that we believe that the new system that's being implemented now will provide consistent benchmarks, and I'll speak to that later. So this is Leslieville, their call volume. This is a graphic that shows what it looks like from a different perspective. Condor, you can see there, and then of course the other one, you can see grass fires there. When we talk about wildland interface, 106 occurrences, motor vehicle incidents, 160. Seems to be structural fires, 126, and vehicle fires. Okay, and Caroline, you'll see the 5-year average there, or I should say 6-year, and the types of calls that they went to. And here's a look at it from a different perspective. Motor vehicle incidents. Go ahead.
It was interesting. I was going through these stats, and there were 3 years in a row. I think it was 16, 17, 18, or 3, that there were a few different municipalities that had a high incidence of brush grass fires. And then they dropped right down. Like some were 35, 35, 35, and then, or 25. And then they dropped down to like 4. So this one here, specifically Caroline, they weren't as bad, but the one before, 17, 20, 20. And then it went right down to 4.
I'm sorry, I can barely hear you, but I think you're asking about the grass brush fires. Is this one here, you're looking at Condor, where it starts at 2014 with 7, goes up to 33, and then down 3 and 4?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. As I said, the data that we were provided with, and we worked with Christine and Steve, the fire chief, quite a bit, is just the way the types of calls were categorized and how they were taken and tracked is the best explanation I can provide for you regarding that.
Jeff, if I may, I just wanted to add to that. If you take a look at the one we're on, the Condor one, where it says brush, grass, no loss, and it kind of drops off as Mayor Burke had mentioned. If you look a little bit further down, it's called Wildland Urban Interface, and the numbers kind of go from 0 and tick up there. So what Clearwater Regional Fire started to do was align the categories within the Fire Pro tracking system with the way the verbiage was in the Regional Fire Agreement, so that the service level matched the response type. So there is some semantics things, like if you combine those two together, that might give you a more clear picture. But unfortunately, it was tracked one way and tracked a different way semantics wise. So it is a little bit, looks like there's a drop off, when really, if you combine those two, it's probably a little bit closer. And I just wanted to note too that those stats are year to date for 2020. That would only be to the end of August.
Yeah,
it wouldn't be the whole year for 2020 because the plan was underway in the summer. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt, Jeff. No problem.
That makes sense.
Yeah, thanks, Christine. I needed that. That was Great that you provide that for me. Okay, so Condor, I think we're at Caroline now. You can see, again, the total number of calls. And again, the categorization, later in the report, we'll talk about one of our observations and recommendations to help that we collect consistent categories and data so that we, like Christina's pointed out, you got brush fire, and then you have wildland interface. They're essentially the same type of category call. So Caroline Station, it's what it looks like in a pie chart. Okay. Nordegg, smaller number of calls, not in a very populated area, and has peak periods based on their recreational activities out there. Nordegg, they're in the pie chart. Motor vehicle incidents at 75 is noteworthy there. Medical response 45. Structural fire 19. Vehicle fire. Here's Rocky Mountain House and the responses. And you can see here that I'm just looking at the two. Yeah, it changes from wildland urban interface 15 in 2018. It was 0 before, and you have grass and brush fires. So yeah, there's a number of calls, different types here that are identified, and you have medical first response and then public service medical co-response. So this is the type of thing that needs to be distilled down into a consistent category. This is what it looks like. Of note here is your alarms no fire, 503 responses. Grass brush fires, 189. Motor vehicle incidents, 428. Our key medical co-response and medical responses looks like over 300 if you add those two together. Yeah, there's a number of recurring emergencies here that are using your capacity in your fire department. Now these maps are based on the time data that was provided to us from the Fire Pro system. And you'll see in this one here is the actual for Leslieville Station, and the dispatch time of 2 minutes, 23 seconds with a mobilization time of 7 minutes and 39 seconds and a travel time of 12 minutes. So if you go back to that NFPA, you can see that we're way out there in terms of a rural response of 14 minutes. But this one just shows the actuals on what's occurring. And in 22 minutes, that red boundary is the response zone that your Leslieville Fire Department is making. Now, a theoretical perspective, if we were to apply the NFPA model of 14 minutes, you would see that once you have your dispatch time, your mobilization time, it leaves you 3 minutes and 58 seconds of travel time from when the wheels turn to the wheels stop. And you can see how that shrinks that boundary down. And we're going to talk about the dispatch time and mobilization time later in the recommendations and observations. Condor, their average response time is 19 minutes and 40 seconds. The dispatch time of 2 minutes and 18 seconds. And I have already mentioned the standard in NFPA 1221 for this is 79 seconds. So you can see why these responses are taking, I wouldn't say excessive amount of time, but it's the actuals of what's going on. And we'll talk about it again later in the recommendations when we talk about pre-alerts and the Red Deer ECC. A mobilization time of 6 minutes and 29 seconds and a travel time of 10 minutes and 53 seconds. The red zone shows you what the Condor department has been able to perform in actual response times. Now, if you apply that to the NFPA 1720 for a 14-minute time, that zone really shrinks down, as you can see. For Caroline, this is the suburban response zone because they believe they also have a rural component, and this is based on 13 minutes and 2 seconds, 2 minutes and 13 seconds for dispatch, 10 minutes and 9 seconds, which a really a good time for a paid-on-call fire department to reach the station and get going is usually anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes. So part of the discussions we have with the fire chief is to take a look at and see, and this is not to suggest that the paid-on-call people are taking an excessive amount of time to get there or anything else like this, but there would be some factors on why it's taken 10 minutes and 9 seconds to get from your place of work or your house to the station. Again, limitation of the system, but it's also worth taking a look at to find if there's some efficiencies can be gained by looking at this. And we will specifically look at dispatch in our recommendations. So that's a suburban for Caroline. This is Caroline's rural response of 25 minutes and 37 seconds. Here you have a dispatch time of 1 minute and 30 seconds. It takes them 11 minutes and 56 seconds to get to the station to get the wheels turning, and then the travel time of 12 minutes and 11 seconds. Sorry. And in Nordig, the response is 41 minutes and 4 seconds. Now, I'll talk about this as well in the recommendation section, but this is what, based on 3 minutes and 51 seconds of dispatch time, a mobilization of 13 minutes and 24 seconds, and a travel time of 23 minutes and 49 seconds. Rocky Mountain House, your average rural response was 24 minutes and 27 seconds, and that's based on 2 minutes and 7 seconds dispatch, 8 minutes and 42 seconds to get to the station, and 13 minutes and 38 seconds of travel time. And you can see the boundary there of what you can achieve in that 24 minutes and 27 seconds. And again, remember, the average number of firefighters is anywhere from 4 to 8 firefighters that manage as your effective response force. Your urban is 10 minutes and 47 seconds, and that is based on 1 minute and 26 seconds dispatch. Your mobilization of 7 minutes, which is pretty good. When you're at home 3 o'clock in the morning, your pager goes off. Next thing you know, 7 minutes and 37 seconds later, you're driving a fire truck. It's a really a good performance. And then travel time leaves you of 1 minute and 44 seconds, and it shows you the average urban response. And if we look at it from the rural perspective of 14 minutes, there you can see the theoretical rural response that you go outside the actual town to provide services. So we also, eventually we had looking at comparative communities. Here's the ones that we believe that had very close similarities with Clearwater County. The one thing I caution people on this one here is no two municipalities operate the same, or counties. So they aggregate their statistics different, their landmass area is different, their population is different. So we use these again just as foundational, take a look at like what's the comparatives and what can we draw as common denominators from. So these are the comparatives that we took a look at. And you will note here that, if you look at percentage of municipal budget, the Clearwater County is of the lowest of the comparatives. And you can see the breakout there of the operating budget from the county and then the other municipalities, incorporated municipalities that are involved. And again, the population and the per capita charges per for each one. And again, your Clearwater Regional Fire Rescue Service is doing a very good job in terms of cost efficient based on our comparative analysis. Your all composite fire departments and number of stations.
Jeff, can I just stop you for a moment, please? I have 2 questions.
Okay.
One from Councillor Brown and then Councillor Fraser.
Okay, Jeff, I find slide 37 and 38 interesting. You pointed out that the Clearwater service has a smaller budget than the other comparatives. Yet, when I look at slide 38, Clearwater County is the only one that has a headquarters. How come the others don't have a headquarters? And how are we able to do it, or how are they able to do it without a headquarters?
Your worship, that's a good question. I'd have to go back and ask each one of them how they do it. I can tell you from my years in Fort McMurray as a regional fire chief, we established a similar organization with a headquarters of senior people who had regional responsibilities to support the 6 paid-on-call stations or separate fire departments in the region of Sallywood Buffalo. So I can't answer that question with any definity, other than, as I said, each municipality does it different. Maybe in these organizations, they have people who are designated with regional responsibilities or supporting those paid-on-calls. We didn't drill down that. In fact, I think County of Grand Prairie, if I'm not mistaken, has full-time regional people to support their number of their departments. But I'm not 100% sure. I really didn't answer your question, Your Worship. That's the best I can come up with.
Another question that I have, Jeff, is there such thing as an overlay of the demand zones so that a resident in the county or the town could look at it and see what kind of coverage Clearwater is able to respond to?
Certainly, with your GIS mapping and you take a look at it, you can look at overlays to see if they're, right now, the way your departments are separated, I can't see that there'd be any overlay. There'd be overlay on your remote, but not on your rural, urban, or suburban responses because of the distance between the fire stations. If you had 2 stations that were close, you could see that occur where you could co-support each other. The example I can think of is Nordig. I know that Rocky Mountain House is the co-response for Nordig, and I believe you're over an hour response. If you, because the staffing in Nordig is a challenge, Rocky Mountain will respond there, and that's over an hour. So there would be no overlay. That's not to say that it wouldn't occur. Once you go through what we're going to recommend a standard of cover here and the standards that you would adopt, there may be some overlay.
And what I'm thinking of, the overlay is, addresses one side of it. The side that it doesn't address is the number of gaps in the service to the rest of the county.
That would be correct. I mean, if Your Worship, if I understand the comment, I find it really hard to hear, but what I think, the closer you live to a fire station, the better service you're going to get. I mean, that's the way. If you're out in a rural area, the standard is saying, well, 14 minutes is a leading practice. And you may or may not get that depending on how far you live. You're 8 miles away from the fire station. You're not going to get the same services if you're in the urban service area of Rocky Mountain House, for example. Did I answer the question?
That does, thank you.
Okay, I have Councillor Fraser and then Councillor.
I just had a question about the percentage of the municipal budget,
but that's collectively, not
I'm
budget. So we would probably be sitting at about 6%.
Can you repeat that question?
yeah.
I was just,
what number would you to come up with a percentage for the municipal budget? So did you add the total budget of all 3?
Can't hear you.
Your Worship, I'm sorry. I wonder if there's somebody could speak closer to the mic or relay that question. Madam Mayor, I can hear you very well.
What number would you for percentage?
Oh.
Can't hear you.
split out.
I'm sorry, Mayor.
Okay,
You know what?
I'm
That's
stumped.
okay.
that's okay.
It's
We were
fine.
just,
Mayor, he said he can hear
say
you.
it again. Say it again to me.
I was just curious for the percentage of the municipal budget, how
Okay.
that was calculated, because ours is half again lower than theirs, and Caroline is huge. So 3%, it doesn't work out the same.
Did you hear that?
Yes. Okay. So the calculation, I think, was aggregated based on all 3 of them at 3.3% collectively. That's why I put that in there. If you went individually, and I don't have that in front of me, but obviously it would be your population based on your contribution of the budget, sort of thing. So we just, working with the steering committee on this one, we looked at it as a collective 3.3%.
Good, Councilor Brennan? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Now I have
Okay.
Councilor Auld.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, mine's along the same lines. We've got one of the lower populations, yet we've got the second highest budget. So that percentage of municipal budget just means our municipal budget is that much higher than everybody else's. Correct?
I think, I'm not
Like,
sure,
we got
Your
the
Worship.
budget $81 million. The only one higher than us is Grand Prairie,
They paid service.
and they're a paid service.
Okay, Grand Prairie, the municipal operations budget. Okay, that's,
So County of Grand Prairie is not a paid service. It's a pay on call as well.
It is, okay.
City of Grand Prairie is a paid service.
yeah, the operations budget is the municipal operations budget to operate all municipal services, as I understand it. And the department operating budget is a portion thereof, or 3.6 million for Clearwater County. I'm not sure if I answered your question.
Yes, no?
The operations budget, that's our whole entire operating budget, not the fire budget, the 26.5.
That's a total
Yeah.
budget.
So the operating.
The operating budget for fire is the 3.06.
Yeah, the operating budget is the total, so Grand Prairie County is 85 million for the whole county, and then you have Slave Lake, the town is 30 million, and the MD is 27.
Okay.
So that's the municipal budget, operations budget.
Okay.
The 26.5 million is our overall budget for the entire town.
Yeah.
The 3.6 million is the department, or sorry,
Yes,
town,
it's
yes, this is the 3.6 million is the operating budget for the fire department.
correct.
And it doesn't include capital.
That does not include that, yeah, that's right, that's just. the-
That is correct as well, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. Is everybody clear on that? Okay,
Is it okay to press on?
yes, please, that's good.
Okay.
Thank you for that explanation.
Yeah. Yeah, good questions. Keep them coming. So the department profiles, you can see here the number of stations they had, and as was pointed out, you have Clearwater County that has a headquarters component, which is specifically there to support the paid on call of each one of the town, the village, and the other services. So this one shows the staffing structure. You can see a total staff of 92 up to 204 for Grand Prairie, the number of full-time staff, which may answer that other question you had about having a headquarters staff. I would guess that these full-time staff that you see here are there also to support the paid on-call system, part-time, and then the paid on-call volunteers as well. And what we did here was we took a look at what's the staffing ratio per kilometer squared. And you can see that if you look at it from that matrix or measure, the 1.2 is of the lowest of the comparative communities. Call volume, and again, because everybody does things different, we tried to do this from a percentage of call volume per kilometer squared. And you can see there's some consistencies there in terms of the number of calls that each county and each comparative service. Again, as you saw in the different stats, these are all done differently. There is no common standard, so it's got to be very careful on how you measure these. And in this case, we tried to do it by the number of calls per kilometer squared.
Jeff, can I just go back to this, sort of one slide ahead, 39, or back 39? The full-time staff.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
6, now that's 6 that's 6 full-time staff in the whole Clearwater Fire
Yes,
Does that
it's a six.
include-
Okay.
Does that include, say, the percentage of Clearwater County staff that designate their time to regional fire? No.
So, Your Worship, if I understand the question, is the other support staff
Okay.
that provide like human resources, information technology, that type of things like that? Is that what you're asking, Your Worship?
Yeah.
No, I don't believe it is. That's just the full-time staff from the Clearwater Regional Fire Rescue Services.
That must be headquarters.
So that's all headquarters, maybe, Christine, can you clarify?
Absolutely, Your Worship. So that's the 4 full-time fire chiefs. So there's a fire chief, deputy fire chief, and 2 assistant chiefs. That one position that's vacant currently we'll be recruiting for. And then 2 full-time administrative staff that support the headquarters team. And if I may, while I have a chance and I have my mic unmuted, I think to answer that headquarters question, I think it's a semantics or a terminology thing. All of those composite services have full-time staff to some capacity. They have chiefs and admin staff and others that Jeff mentioned to support their fire services. We just have identified ours previously, historically, in budget separately. And it was just due to the nature of them being in a different building. Some of those may be within a fire station. Therefore, their headquarters is within one of their 6 stations, et cetera. So I think it is just a terminology semantics thing, but this chart shows that the full-time staffing complement from those municipalities that support the fire service provision. So I just wanted to point that out too, to answer Councillor Brown's question from a little bit earlier.
Sure, that's great. Thanks, Christine. Councillor Fraser, did you have a question?
I have another one just about what number is being used for the calls per kilometer squared. Is that the total area of Clearwater County or just the demand zones?
That would be for the entire area. We didn't separate it by demand zone in this case, because it would just be a lot of information. It would confuse what we're trying to present here. Again, like I said, because everybody does it different, it's hard to come up with common denominator. So we just took a look at it by square kilometer. We didn't look at urban, rural, remote, suburban categories.
And so that would include Crown land?
Yes, it would include the entire area, yes.
Okay, thank you. You can
Am I press on? Okay. Okay, and we went through the call volumes. Now we're into the recommendations that we found, and one of the things that we found was in terms of understanding your building inventory and the risks, was to look at having a comprehensive structural risk inventory where you would base your inspections on your high risk occupancies, as well as your building permits, plan reviews, those types of things like this. And there does not appear to be a system for reviewing new and existing properties. As a result, the Regional Fire Rescue Service has limited access to adequate data to identify high priority structure, fire risk, and develop risk management strategy. The county's planning and development permit provides them with a development permits after they've been approved. And it does not allow for a fire service review, including confirmation of the fire safety code regulation. The town provides the Regional Fire Rescue Services with business license applications and does not provide the development permits. This recommendation is essentially saying for the fire chief to develop a process working with planning and development and in the town and in the other areas, and monitor the building stock as the communities grow. Also for pre-fire planning, the community risk profile, and also being ahead of plan reviews, business licensings, and applications, permits, and those types of things like that. And we're suggesting a 24 to 36 month period.
We just changed
Okay.
that, right?
Inspections.
Inspections, okay,
You and permit application.
okay, okay.
Okay. This is where are we here? Okay. Undertake a comprehensive risk analysis of the individual demand and develop a standard of cover. So you have your intermunicipal agreement. It does identify the core services, but we don't talk about the level and the types, or the different demand zones. And we don't talk about in the agreement about what are the standards and the percentages, call percentiles, those types of things like this. And this is usually done by a standard of cover policy that provides a comprehensive risk analysis at each of the individual demand zones, identifying high and extreme risks and unique risks, and it also existing service levels, standard operating guidelines and policy. So really it's the essence of the master plan. It's a policy document that clarifies what services are being provided to what level, and it adopts into the risk factors that we have identified. And it provides an accountability loop for performance monitoring and reporting. Okay, one of the common themes in the interview was the lack of public understanding and the general operations of the Clearwater Regional Fire Rescue Service and the lack of info flowing back to key stakeholders. The information gathered in the standard cover can be shared at both the senior administrative and elected official level. This can facilitate purposeful and informed decision-making framework for both these officials regarding the need for specific services, setting service levels, allocating funding, and establishing performance goals. In the absence of regular performance reporting, not all municipal partners or citizens have a clear understanding of the services and service levels that the Clearwater Regional Fire Rescue Services provides. Once completed, a standard of cover policy may be shared with the public to provide clarity with respect to services provided and service level expectations. We took a look at the dangerous goods hazardous material going through the county and through the urban and suburban areas, and we put a recommendation here that dangerous goods and hazardous material are transported by road and rail through Clearwater County, many through the center of Rocky Mountain House in Caroline. There are no dangerous good routes identified, and the quantities and types of materials do not appear to be monitored. Now, they're not suggesting here that you're going to establish a route, but they're like a bypass route, but there may be some innovative ways to manage this, like restricting when they go through during high traffic, domestic traffic, and those types of things like this. But to take a look at this and be aware of what's being transported through your community.
Jeff, can I just interrupt?
Sure.
Our CAO gets a list of dangerous goods coming, or is that by rail?
From CN, it was on
CN.
rail. Yeah.
On this, the rail, yes, of course, yeah. But I don't think the rail provides detailed information. If I understand, they'll tell you the type of material going through, but they won't tell you the frequency or the volumes.
They tell us how many cars of each product is going through.
Okay, but they don't. Did they tell you the frequency? How often?
Yes.
Okay. Well, there's other regions that we looked at that information wasn't provided. So that's good that they share that with you. Okay. Recommendation number 4 has to deal with Nordig, and again, I want to emphasize that there will always be a response going out to Nordig. It's just maintaining a group of volunteers out there is a challenge. And what we thought here was the Clearwater County staff and the residents worked together to find a reasonable solution. And we looked at some things like having more participation from the full-time residents that are there. Maybe provide additional incentives for other volunteers to relocate there for peak periods. And the last one was to look at a work experience program, which has been successful in a number of resort communities like Big White, Silver Star, Sun Peaks. Hinton uses WEPS, which is a program of apprentice firefighters who come and live in the station for a year. They get to interact in a department. They get a letter of reference, which in the case of Big White leads to about, I think, around a 90% higher rate. Most of these people want to be career firefighters, and they use this as part of their career development. So there's a number of options there, but I think working with the community is the best solution to provide a consistent, sustainable, viable response force, ERF in Nordig. The Regional Fire Rescue Service has a number of committees, and in talking with the chief officers and the interviews that indicated that the committees are taking typically 2 to 3 hours. Many of the firefighters interviewed, some of whom were existing committee members, expressed concern and frustration over the effectiveness of these committees. There's an expectation that these are decision-making committees and they're not recommendations, so that increases frustration. So what we're recommending here is to relook at all those committees, take some proper minutes, develop some terms of reference so they understand what their role is. Look at an overarching Regional Fire Rescue Employment Management Committee to deal with paid on call issues. I know that there is an OHS committee corporately within the county, and we think that given the number of volunteers and the specific type of work, that you need to develop an OH committee with OHS committee for the firefighters. And one of the committee is working really well is the structural and apparatus and equipment and peril and life safety committees, and as ad hoc or subcommittees that are given specific mandate as required and directed by the fire chief. So this is just an overall look at how you're engaging your employees and helping them be empowered to make decisions by formalizing it and just enhancing what you already established. During the interviews with the fire chief, the deputy chiefs, and assistant, it was obvious that each demonstrates an enthusiastic and professional passion for the fire service. The interviews and surveys with staff, administration, and political indicated that the Clearwater County Regional Fire Rescue Service administrator needs to improve their internal communication processes amongst the team and stakeholders. So what we thought here was get the group together, the headquarters staff together, with Christine, develop a plan of action of SMART goals, measurable, and realistic, attainable, and have a focused roadmap on where you're taking the department, and then communicate that with the members of the Regional Fire Rescue Service.
Jeff, I'm just wondering, you're reading off something that we don't have.
Yeah, it's my speaking notes.
Oh, okay. Those are more information into the recommendation. Because we have all the recommendations in front of us.
Your Worship, the speaking notes are the observations that are contained in the full report. So if you were to go to observation or go to recommendation 6A, right above that would be observation number 6, which is essentially what I use as speaking notes.
Okay, thank you.
They're in the full report.
Okay, I'm just kind of looking, we're only on slide 6 and we have 20 to go. 21.
I will keep going. I'll be brief, Your Worship. 6B is update the job descriptions. We won't delve into that. The number 7 is to develop a short-term and long-term goals as an organization, working together to come up with where we're taking the department in terms of things like the standard of cover that we've talked about, maybe a goal that you want to achieve, the relook and enhancing of the committee structure. In the organizational chart, we're recommending that you change one of the assistant chiefs to a deputy chief position. You have a deputy chief of operations, one with logistics and fire prevention administration, and that they would have would be better balanced. And then you would have your assistant chief of fire prevention and a casual within that a particular branch of the Regional Fire Rescue Service. And it's just from our perspective, the chiefs are required to be on call on a rotational basis. With the vacant position, they're on call once every 3 weeks. There's a number of demands on their capacity to effectively manage the respective administrative abilities or responsibilities. Are putting a large amount of overtime in to consistently meet all demands of the responsibilities and those that were previously performed by the vacant assistant chief position. Workload pressure on the administrative officers is an outcome of this, and we just believe, in our opinion, that you need to reorganize a little bit and develop essentially 2 branches within the Regional Fire Rescue Services. During the interviews and the discussions, there was some confusion about when the bat chiefs are required. Some of the bat chiefs would go to every emergency. And so we thought that one of the ways to do this was to develop an alarm assignment, which basically the first responding officer would declare whether it's a first alarm, second alarm, third alarm, and each one of those is embedded in the response logic in the Red Deer ECC, and it would say when the bat chief required, when headquarters staff is required. It just formalizes when these larger events need a higher level of incident command. We talked about keeping the recruitment drive on an annual basis rather than once or twice a year. And once you accrued enough candidates, you could do an intake. But this just allows more flexibility for anybody who's interested in being a firefighter to have an opportunity to join rather than wait for doing an intake once or twice a year. The work experience program, I talked about that, is it could help with daytime responses where it's difficult to get your paid on call. You go into this program, it would provide possibly a solution for the challenges you have in Nordic. And over the next few years, your retention has been very good, but over the next few years, you have a number of senior firefighters who are looking at retirement. And we thought there'd be an opportunity here to research opportunities to keep them to do other things. And I think of Fairview County, where one of the senior captains didn't want to respond anymore. So he decided that he was going to do all the minor maintenance on the vehicles, and he contributed to the department without having to respond, and he provided some leadership and guidance for those junior members. So this is an opportunity to look at non-operational roles. One other department we looked at had part-time public educators, for example, who would go into schools and care facilities, stuff like that, for fire prevention. There was observations during the survey about demonstrating a transparent promotional policy, and this is just working with the paid on call. The fire chief comes up with a clear, transparent promotion policy and looks at key pieces such as number of practices, number of responses that they make, teamwork, leadership, technical competence as the criteria in a promotional policy. This is to look at amending the alarm assignment, or correction, the mutual aid contracts, updating the dispatch protocol mutual aid to include automatic aid. So what's not there is you have under these mutual aid agreements, if you had a major fire in an apartment, a 3-story apartment building, a multifamily building in Rocky Mountain House, these mutual aid agreements could be amended that it would be automatic. As soon as the officer declares that he has a 3rd alarm fire, for example, then this would kick in your mutual aid automatically, and could be, again, in the response logic within Red Deer. We know that there is that the Clearwater Regional Fire Rescue Services provides support to the search and rescue, and we know there's an MOU in place. We just think that there's a need here to look at improving the efficiency and effectiveness between the two in terms of jurisdictional roles and responsibilities, and just clarify that. And I say at the very least, this process will improve the interoperability and relationship between the two agencies. And I think this is specifically with the drone, for example, and both the departments have rescue, rope rescue and technical rescue, swiftwater. So it may be an opportunity to look at how you can complement each other and at least understand your jurisdictional roles. Implement a cyclical fire inspection program. I think that we understand that they're by complaint right now, and we believe that the high risk occupancies, schools, theaters, industrial occupancies should be subjected to a cyclical inspection process, and as part of looking at the life cycle, life safety systems. They're most efficient and effective method of ensuring the ongoing function of these systems. Failure of life safety systems increases the risk of injury and death to occupants and firefighters. So rather than wait for somebody to request or complain. A robust inspection program needs to be, and this would be contingent on having the capacity within the headquarters staff to do this cyclical inspection program.
This is the one that we've just changed back to not having the mandatory inspections.
I believe that is correct, yes.
Yeah, we've had a great deal of discussion on that. So, okay, thanks.
So this one is, when we looked at facilities, we see that, what we got here, the two current stations, Condor and Nodeg, are modern and fully functional for the needs of the regional fire rescue for the foreseeable future. Caroline Station, while small by modern fire hall specification, remains functional. Rocky Mountain House is fully functional, however, is presently at capacity for safe and effective utilization by the regional fire rescue services, and future demands will challenge the current facility. So we're looking at doing a functional assessment of both the Village of Caroline and the Rocky Mountain House Fire Station.
Do we have that in our 10-year plan, budget plan? A new fire line? No, we have an RCMP building first. Thanks. Okay, we're on to number
17. We talked about this. The types of incidents were captured each were not consistent and made it difficult to compare year to year. And we're saying here is develop a consistent incident tracking categories. And I know that Christine and the fire chief have been working on this. And you will see that there'll be a consistent tracking of this data throughout the county.
Mr. Alderson?
Yeah, just can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
You were mentioning there's some inconsistencies between different regions as well. So is the same thing going to be done there? Like, is there any initiative you were saying for like just regarding call volumes or even volumes and frequencies and things that there was an issue? It was hard to really peg those numbers because there was inconsistencies or they were different between regions. Is there an initiative to try and get those all the same in Alberta?
And not to my knowledge, that would be that'd be very difficult to get a provincial level criteria that this is how you collect your incident data. I have no answer for that. It's just not on the provincial or the fire marshal's horizon. And like I said, there'd be considerable challenges with doing that because every municipality wants to do it differently. So it's a good thought. I just don't know. Maybe Chief Davian can talk about it being in Alberta, but I would be surprised if there's any type of initiative like that.
I was just curious, just to make it easier for municipalities to have proper comparative analysis.
Yeah, they would have consistent policy for fire reporting and cause determination, but not for incident types because of the difference of the services and how you track those.
Thank you.
This one deals with what we talked about ECC, and that the NFPA standard is 79 seconds. And right now you're averaging 2 minutes of 38 seconds, and there's no use of pre-alerts. So the fire chief working with Red Deer to look at a way to pre-alert and cut that mobilization or that call handling time down that gets your firefighters moving quicker and then increases your response zone and your response capacity. Number 19 deals with the standard of cover, the benchmarks that you would use so that you could track the data and report it as part of an accountability mechanism. The clear understanding the scope of the overall risk in community while enabling them to identify resources and response capabilities necessary to adequately address those risks. The standard of cover will further ensure that the Clearwater Regional Fire Rescue has a safe and effective response force for all emergencies, including suppression, medical service, and specialized responses. And this provides, greatly enhances the role and clarity between the political, administrative, and operational. Essentially, this is like engineering standards that you have or development standards. We're saying the same thing applies in the fire department. Here's the level of services that you're going to provide. Here's the capability you have and the standards you do based on those various demand zones. And then the chief can come back on a regular basis and say, hey, in Rocky Mountain House, for example, we're meeting our 90th percentile or our 80th percentile, and here's the call data to demonstrate that. SOGs, standard operating guidelines and SOPs, you have them in place for most of the operations. These things get out of date very quickly, and we're recommending here the fire chief finds a process on how to keep these things up to date, which also evokes the members to read them so that they're familiar with them. The records management, the Fire Pro, I know that they're working on this now to develop, have an excessive amount of data. The requirement, intermunicipal regional fire service agreement to share the performance statistics in an annual summary report to the municipal or the partner municipalities. Feedback from the regional partner councilors expressed concerns that they were not getting these reports. This is what we talked about with the standard of cover, that there is a consistent reporting mechanism, quarterly, dashboard, whatever it would be, so that you as the oversight for the town of Rocky Mountain House, you know what your performance targets are, how the fire department is meeting the set goals in the standard of cover. Wow, I guess you have that. Thank you. And I know I went over time. I do apologize. Any other questions, Your Worship?
There's a lot of information in there, and I thank you for that. I believe we've asked most of our questions throughout the presentation, so thanks for allowing that. Anybody have any other questions? We're good? Okay, well, thank you very much for that presentation. And we did, as I said before, we did have this to read before as well, so we've all gone through it. So thank you.
Thank
you, Your Worship. I hope everybody stays safe and that we get past this pandemic in short order.
Yep, we all do. These presentations are much better in person.
Oh, it's easier for me too, I'll tell you.
Yeah. So thanks, Christine and Steve.
Thank you, Your Worship. Appreciate the time.
Yeah.
Thank you, Your Worship, as well, and appreciate the time.
Hey, yeah. Take care, you guys.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on to number 4.1, to adopt the regular council meeting minutes of January 5th. Did everybody had a chance, obviously, to read them? Just looking for a motion to accept. Councillor All. All in favor of that motion? That's carried. Thank you. We'll move on to number 5.1, the delegation business. Councillor Auld.
I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
Is this the same company that did the analysis about 4 years ago?
I think it was, but I wanted to check into that.
I'd like to see a copy of that
Comparison.
and see where they're at today.
Sure.
What they recommended then, what they're recommending now.
Yeah.
And see if there's any progress made or if this is all a waste of time.
Okay, Councillor Phillips.
I mean, there's a lot of recommendations in there. How do we go about figuring out which ones we're going to do and which ones we're not going to do? That's
We don't, because this is Clearwater County, right? This is their recommendation.
well, there's some in here that will directly involve, especially the ones where you're talking about building permits and things like that. Do we have any say in that at all?
Yeah,
Yes.
so Your Worship, yes, we do, and they would have to come to town to advance that recommendation if they wanted to. I mean, we just went through the QMP not that long ago for inspections. Just a process review and development permits that would have to come to the town.
Councillor Brown.
I think you answered my questions. I had two. Second one, maybe I'll ask them anyway. The recommendation number 15 about the cyclical fire inspections. Can those be done by a contractor or do they have to be done by the service?
Your worship, so under our QMP, the town actually has a choice. We can, for fire inspections, we can hire a contractor or use regional fire service.
Perfect, thank you.
And I had a question about the dangerous goods route. Is that something that we should be looking at through town, or I don't have any experience with that, do you?
Your worship, so typically a municipality, they'll like go to a large municipality, they'll have assigned dangerous good routes like going through Edmonton or Calgary. So here it also just goes probably through Highway 11.
We don't have a lot of options.
Yeah.
11A then too.
Going 2212 whether you like it or not.
Right, or 11A through town, there must be dangerous goods.
Yeah, so unless the municipality determines that they don't want the dangerous goods coming from town, they would have to figure out a different route for them to bypass town.
Thank you, Councillor Alt.
Well, that was my other comment that I've got a concern over that, because it's up to them to determine what is dangerous goods and what is and isn't allowed. And if they decide that they're not allowing fuel through, then everything bypasses town, that takes everybody out of our resources.
Yeah, no, I was just curious why that's a recommendation, and obviously there's strict regulation on what they can truck. So, I mean, they have their own set of standards already.
So that would have to come back to the town council. It'd be pretty tough to take the dangerous goods route around town, because then you're on rural roads, which typically have, weight restrictions in certain areas. Plus you're dealing with provincial highway.
Right.
Unless like that's a future idea for a bypass type of thing that has already been kiboshed by the province. So.
Yeah, no, that was just the question that I had. I didn't know if it was a common thing. Mr. Fraser?
Well, and for the path that the dangerous goods take through town on Highway 11, I'm just thinking of any other route, we'd send them around and there'd be more residential in any of the roads. That's at least commercial. So there'd be less people there.
Yeah, I by no means, I'm not suggesting we do that. I'm just simply asking the question as to, is it common that towns have that? And so we're not uncommon.
No, but typically it sticks to the major roads through your community, so the highways, or 752 probably.
Yeah. Okay, sounds good. So back to Councillor Ald's question then about looking at the past fire review. Do we want to look at that before, or we have to, do we just accept this as information for now, or?
So your worship, probably prefer a resolution asking for that document, and is it just to send to council for information, or do you want to come back for discussion?
Well, it really doesn't have anything to do with us. Like I say, it's county. So I guess it's not really anything we can change or hold them to account.
So I'm hearing it's just more for information, just to compare. So perhaps you could just we could find it, email it out to council, and we can all take a look at that.
Yeah, so administration will do that, your worship. Okay. So it's just accepting this report.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions on the report or comments? No. So I just need a motion to accept this report as information. Councillor Brown. All in favor of that motion? That's carried. Thank you. Okay, we don't have any old business, new business, correspondence for action. Just looking for a motion to accept correspondence for information. 9.1, just 9.1 as correspondence for information. Councillor Alderson? Okay. All in favor of that motion? That's carried. Thank you. 10.1, the action list. Okay. Any queries on the action list? Okay. Just a motion to accept the action list as presented. Councillor Narang? All in favor of that motion? And that's carried. Thank you. Just notices of motion.
We're missing admin inquiries.
Admin inquiries, yeah.
Oh, it's on ours. It's on the computer one.
Oh, okay. It's not on mine.
Guess you don't get to make one.
So it's 11 then, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So does anybody have any admin inquiries? Councillor Auld?
I've been asked a couple times in the past and I haven't brought it up, but I was asked again today, where the bylaw officers park right here on the corner by the fire hydrant. I've had complaints it's too congested, and people are asking that we make that into no parking zone between the fire hydrant and the parking lot. Apparently the streets are offset when you come up this direction from the.
They are.
And it's if it's busy at the time, I haven't experienced it. I know it's offset, but I don't know if it's an issue not big enough to make it a no parking zone.
Yeah, your worship, I mean, we'll look at that. I mean, we were actually even discussing and making them park in the parking lot.
That's what was requested.
Yeah.
Get them off the street.
Okay. Good. Yeah. Okay. So I guess on that actually does bring me to one that I have, and it's the back alley here. Now that we are going to be busier with FCSS here, I'm just wondering, it's kind of a real, it's a real blind spot right there coming out, and I'm wondering if could we put a mirror or something like that for pedestrians, or do we put a stop sign for pedestrians?
I mean, worship, we'll look at it. I mean, there's a few options. I mean,
Okay.
the mirror or, yeah, 'cause it's a blind.
It's very blind, and I mean,
Especially the-
yeah, I can creep out there, and then, and it's also hard to, unless we just make it like a no turning left there, because it's hard to turn when people are parked there, to turn left. You're creeping, and suddenly there's a car there, so.
You feel like you're halfway to the road.
And we're just gonna have a lot more pedestrians there as well now, so. Okay, any other admin inquiries? Any notices of motion? Okay. Okay, it's 8:24. I'll just call a 5-minute recess before we go into, and we'll come back and go into closed session. Thank you.